They say the hardest missions are the ones that choose you, the ones that force you to make a choice between the oath you swore and the voice inside your head telling you that some things matter more than orders. This is one of those stories. Deep in the classified corridors of military intelligence, there are operators who don't exist on paper. No medals, no recognition, no acknowledgement. They move through hostile territory like ghosts, completing missions that shift the balance of power without a single headline. She was one of them. Call sign Alpha 7, a name that appeared on classified rosters seen by maybe a dozen people in the entire defense structure. For 6 years, she had been the gold standard. Every operation executed with surgical precision. Every extraction completed without compromise. Every target reached exactly according to plan. Her superiors trusted her because she never improvised, never questioned, never deviated from mission parameters. She was the operator you sent when failure wasn't an option, which made what happened in that forest so impossible to understand. The mission briefing had taken place in a facility that didn't appear on any map. Underground, temperature controlled, secured behind biometric locks that required clearance, levels most officers would never achieve. The room held 6 people. Each knew only their specific role in an operation designed with multiple fail-safes and zero margin for error. Her assignment was straightforward. Infiltrate contested woodland along the northern border, reach a concealed communications relay buried deep in the forest, plant a sophisticated listening device, and extract without detection the kind of intelligence operation that could provide strategic advantage for months, maybe years. Information gathered from that single device could prevent conflicts before they started or expose threats before they materialized. The planning had consumed 3 months. Satellite imagery analyzed frame by frame, with a pattern studied for optimal insertion windows. Enemy patrol routes mapped and memorized. Every variable controlled. Every contingency planned. She had studied the terrain until she could navigate it blindfolded. Memorized every landmark, every natural feature that could provide cover or concealment. The insertion went flawlessly. Dropped 8 kilometers from the target. She moved through the Poidon darkness like she was born to it. Her gear weighed 40 pounds but felt light. Nothing after years of conditioning. That pushed human limits. Night vision painted the forest in shades of green and grey, transforming the alien landscape into something she could read like a book. 3 hours into the operation, she was ahead of schedule. Her GPS tracker showed steady progress toward the target coordinates. Back at the operations center, analysts monitored her vital signs and position data, seeing exactly what they expected. Heart rate steady, movement efficient, mission progressing according to plan. Then everything changed. The sound was so faint, she almost missed it. A whimper, barely audible above the wind moving through pine branches overhead. She froze mid-step, every sense suddenly focused. In her earpiece, the encrypted comm channel remained silent, just the subtle static that indicated an open but unused connection. There it was again, high-pitched this time, carrying an emotional quality that separated it from animal sounds. Her training kicked in automatically, processing the acoustic signature, determining distance and direction. But something else kicked in too, something that had nothing to do with training. She recognized that sound, the unmistakable cry of a child in genuine fear. Her mind raced through calculations. The target was still 2 kilometers ahead. She had a narrow window to complete the mission before daylight increased. The risk of detection, deviating from her route, would compromise the entire operation, potentially endanger other missions running simultaneously in the region. Every protocol she had ever learned told her to continue forward, complete the objective, report the anomaly during debrief. But that sound cut through every protocol like a knife. She made the decision in less than 3 heartbeats. Adjusting her compass, she moved of the planned route, each step taking her further from mission success and deeper into unknown territory. Her tactical mind screamed warnings. Unscouted terrain meant unknown threats. Deviation meant her backup would be looking for her in the wrong location. Every meter increased multiple categories of risk. The tracks appeared quickly. Small, uneven impressions in soft mud between exposed roots. The pattern told a story of stumbling, not purposeful movement. A child's footprints, barely visible in the filtered forest light, leading deeper into dense undergrowth, where ancient trees had fallen anew. Growth created a maze of shadows. She slowed her approach, scanning methodically. Training demanded readiness for any scenario, even one involving a lost child who might not be alone. Beneath a massive fallen log, half buried in decomposing leaves, she found him, a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, his face pale with exhaustion, clothes torn and muddy. He looked up at her, with eyes that held no understanding of who she was or why. Someone in full tactical gear had appeared in his hiding place. Just fear, exhaustion, and something that looked like the last fragment of hope before it dies completely. In her earpiece, a voice crackled through. Alpha 7, you're showing deviation from planned route. Confirm current status and intentions. She didn't respond. Her attention focused entirely on the terrified child who flinched when wind rattled branches above their concealed position. This moment would define everything that came after. This single decision in a forgotten forest would be analyzed, questioned, and debated by people who had never faced this choice. But she wasn't thinking about any of that. She removed her tactical jacket and wrapped it around his small frame. The mission objective: 3 months of planning, strategic intelligence that could shift geopolitical balance. None of it mattered anymore. Lifting him carefully, she felt his weight against her chest, negligible compared to the gear she routinely carried, but carrying infinite significance. Every step back toward extraction now required complete recalculation. She could no longer move with aggressive efficiency. She had to keep him safe. The boy nestled against her vest, small hands gripping fabric with desperate trust. She adjusted her grip and began moving, eyes scanning continuously, ears tuned to every sound. That's when she heard the voices, faint radio chatter on frequencies that weren't part of her mission's operational parameters. Languages she recognized but wasn't supposed to encounter in this area. Hostile forces, close enough that wrong movement could bring them within visual range. Her situation had just transformed from complicated to potentially fatal. She shifted the boy's weight, keeping his face turned inward for warmth and concealment. Her boots found the softest ground, avoiding twigs and dry leaves. Each step required conscious evaluation of risk versus progress. A silhouette appeared through dense tree trunks about 50 meters away. Armed, scanning the undergrowth with professional methodology, she froze completely, controlling her breathing, until the figure turned and disappeared behind a cluster of birch trees. The boy stirred against her chest, murmuring something she couldn't understand. She pressed a finger gently to her lips. Remarkably, he seemed to understand. Going completely still, breaking from her original extraction route, she cut toward an emergency pickup zone that existed only in classified contingency plans. The location was known to fewer than a handful of personnel, reserved for situations where standard procedures became impossible. Navigation required moving through terrain she hadn't reconnoitered, relying on topographical memory and basic compass work rather than GPS waypoints. The risk of becoming lost increased substantially, but continuing toward the primary extraction point would have been suicide. By the time she reached the designated clearing, the boy had stopped shivering under the warmth of her jacket. She activated her emergency beacon with 2 deliberate taps, a silent signal that would be recognized without requiring voice communication. Minutes that felt like hours passed before the deep, rhythmic thumping of rotor blades began rolling through the forest. A small, unmarked helicopter descended into the clearing with practiced precision. When the crew member reached to take the boy from her arms, she shook her head firmly. She wasn't releasing him until they were securely inside the aircraft and airborne. No words were exchanged. None were necessary when every second on the ground increased risk of detection. She climbed into the cargo compartment, still carrying the boy, only transferring him to the crew chief once they were lifting off. The helicopter rose above the forest canopy within 60 seconds, leaving nothing but settling leaves and fading rotor noise below. Back at the forward operating base, her absence from the mission tracking grid caused immediate concern. Computer screens displayed her last known position as a static marker that hadn't updated according to the predetermined timeline. Technical specialists replayed her movement log repeatedly, trying to understand the sudden deviation. She walked through the facility side entrance hours later, helmet under one arm, the boy still wrapped in her tactical jacket and sleeping against her shoulder. The site stopped conversations mid-sentence. An operations officer stepped forward, his mouth already open to demand explanations. His expression shifted dramatically when he saw the child's face, authority giving way to something quieter. She transferred the boy to medical personnel without offering explanation or justification. The medics took him toward the facility's infirmary, leaving behind only questions no one seemed prepared to ask directly. In the corner of the operations center, a senior commander watched her movement through the facility without speaking. The nod he gave when their eyes met briefly was subtle, but carried weight that younger personnel couldn't interpret. Hours later, in the dimly lit break area, 2 junior operatives discussed the day's events in hushed voices. She didn't even complete the assigned operation, one observed. his tone mixing confusion with criticism. His companion shook his head slowly. Doesn't matter what she didn't do. You saw who she brought back. The boy's parents arrived 2 days later, transported by officials who provided no explanation of how their son had been located. They hadn't even known where he'd disappeared from, only that he'd been missing for several weeks. They requested information about the person responsible for finding him, asking for a name or unit designation that would allow them to express gratitude. Their requests were politely deflected through official channels. She never asked for recognition or acknowledgement. The decision to abandon her mission had been made in a moment when protocol became irrelevant, when following orders would have required ignoring something that couldn't be ignored. The classified after action report would note equipment failures and communication difficulties, explaining the mission's incomplete status. No mention would be made of unauthorized rescues or deviations from approved procedures. Somewhere in that forest, her original objective remained unaccomplished. Sophisticated listening devices still waiting to be installed. Intelligence still waiting to be gathered. But no one in the command structure mentioned reassigning the mission or sending another operative to complete what she'd left unfinished, because some missions choose you, and when they do, you discover that the highest level of clearance isn't about accessing classified information. It's about having the authority to decide what matters most when official priorities conflict with fundamental human obligations. Years of training teach you to follow orders without question, but it only takes one moment to learn that some things are more important than orders. That the truest measure of a warrior isn't how well they complete missions, but how well they recognize when the mission has changed. She never spoke about what happened in that forest, never justified her decision or explained her actions. She didn't need to, because the people who mattered understood that. Sometimes the mission that matters most isn't the one in the briefing documents. It's the one you find when you stop following the plan and start following your conscience. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Warriors for more stories about the choices that define us when no one's watching.